All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are unpacking a really provocative argument about the music industry right now. It's a story all about power, loyalty, and, yeah, collapse. And it all revolves around one of the most controversial figures in hip hop, period. So, we're going to break down this wild claim and see what it might tell us about where music is headed. So, the whole argument we're digging into today kicks off with this statement. I mean, wow, not hip hop could use, but hip hop needs Birdman again. That's not a suggestion, right? That's a flat-out declaration that the whole genre is missing something, or someone. It's for sure a claim that's meant to make you sit up and go, wait, what? And yeah, that's really the big question we're tackling here. Why on earth would someone say that this incredibly controversial figure is essential? Well, the argument goes that ever since Birdman and his empire kind of faded from the top spot, the music industry's gotten, well, messy, unfocused, leaderless even. And to really get why anyone would think that, we've got to rewind and go back to how it all started. Okay, so first up, the empire builder. We got to remember, before all the drama, before the headlines, you had Birdman and his brother Slim building Cash Money Records literally from the dirt up. And they weren't just winging it. They had a very, very specific vision in mind. And that word, empire, is super important here. See, the whole idea wasn't just about getting lucky and stumbling upon a couple of hit artists. No way. It was about building a machine, a self-sustaining system designed from day one for total long-term domination. And here is the result of that system. I mean, just look at this roster, seriously. This is not just a list of successful rappers. These are cultural icons, legends. This is held up as the undeniable proof that their artist development system was, without a doubt, one of the best we've ever seen in hip-hop. But every empire eventually faces a crisis. And for Cash Money, that crisis was the Great Exodus. So, what happens when the very stars that hold up the dynasty start to leave? Okay, and this right here is the absolute core of the whole argument. And look, it's a controversial take for sure, but the claim is pretty simple. For most of the artists who left the Cash Money machine, they also left the peak of their commercial power behind. The source puts it like this: not hate, history. And you can't talk about this without talking about the biggest star of them all, right? The franchise player himself, Lil Wayne. A certified GOAT, nobody's questioning that. But the argument really zeroes in on what happened after the beef with Cash Money really kicked off. The argument is that the whole public battle, especially the crazy long delay of the Carter 5, just changed the momentum of his career. The talent, the respect from his peers, that never went away. But that feeling, that feeling of his unstoppable commercial dominance where he just owned the charts, the claim is it was just never quite the same after that. Okay, let's take another one of the founding fathers of the label, Juvenile, an absolute giant. His music basically defined the sound of a whole region in the late 90s and early 2000s. And his story is used as another key piece of evidence. The argument goes that after he left, even with his legendary status, he just never hit that same peak of mainstream domination again. And the point being made is that this was a pattern, not a one-off. They point to other OGs like BG and Turk and suggest a pretty tough pill to swallow. Maybe the system itself was bigger, maybe even more important than the individual stars it launched. And that leads us right into the emotional core of this whole saga, the family feud. Because the fight between Birdman and Lil Wayne, man, it wasn't just business. It was deeply, deeply personal. And when that relationship fell apart, it sent tremors through the entire industry. I mean, this really lays out the tragedy of it, doesn't it? You go from a father and son relationship, which was the absolute bedrock of the empire's power, to lawsuits, public callouts, and just completely broken trust. The whole point here is that this wasn't just two guys falling out. This was the end of what was arguably hip-hop's last great power structure. And right in the middle of this whole mess was this one album. For years, Thought Carter V wasn't just a record. It was a hostage. Its delay became a symbol for everything that had gone wrong. All the broken promises, all the legal fights. Really, the end of a whole era. But look, away from all the personal drama, there's a huge business lesson here that a lot of people miss, and that's what we're getting into now. The mogul's blueprint, the financial smarts that really fueled this whole empire. Just look at that number, $30 million, and this is back in 1998. This was a game-changing deal that took Cash Money from a regional powerhouse to a global name. But as huge as that number is, it wasn't even the most important part of the deal, not by a long shot. And here it is. This is the secret sauce, the absolute key to their entire financial dynasty. In an industry famous for taking artists' most valuable assets, Birdman and Slim did something legendary. They negotiated to keep ownership of their master recordings. So what does that mean? Put it this way, it's the difference between renting your house and owning the land it sits on forever. And that one move, well, it would pay off for decades to come. And here's the proof right here. By Birdman's own admission, that catalog, all that music from decades ago, is still bringing in tens of millions of dollars every single year. That's what you call legacy income. It's the money that just keeps coming in long after the hits fall off the charts. And this is held up as the prime example of real mogul thinking, focusing on ownership, on assets, not just the quick cash from an advance. All right, so that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle. This is where everything we've talked about connects to make a really bold statement about the music industry today. Is it, as the argument claims, a leaderless game now? And this is what the argument claims has fundamentally changed. Back in the Mughal era, it was all about building empires, fighting for ownership, and creating a dynasty that would last. The argument is that today, the focus has shifted. It's about chasing quick fame, settling for stream numbers instead of sales, and going for that one viral moment instead of building a long-term career. And that's the final thesis right there. The core idea is that without moguls, like Birdman, these figures who provided structure, who applied pressure, who had a real system for development, the industry just lost its direction. The leadership that's supposedly missing isn't just about spotting talent. It's about forcing a long-term vision, demanding greatness, and playing a long strategic game of chess. And while other people have stepped into the power vacuum, the argument is that the thrones, they're still empty. So at the end of the day, we're left with this big question. We've just laid out a pretty compelling argument that something important was lost when hip-hop's last great empire crumbled. But is that true? Is today's industry, more decentralized and artist-focused, actually weaker? Or has the very definition of power just changed completely? That's the big question I want to leave you with.